有名な人って緊張すっからよ。そこにいやがったな、漫画家。まだ殴り足らねえぞ、こら。
Well, we got over that quick. How do you follow up Stardust Crusaders? Many would think that you couldn't, but Araki tried anyway with Diamond is Unbreakable. And not only did that work out, but it became my favorite part of the entire series. This one opting to take place inside of a singular town as opposed to the globe-trotting adventure that Stardust Crusaders was may seem like a bit of a step down, however, having a more character-focused story does have its strong points, and I will be going over those throughout this video. The first episode opens in that very town of... on what seems to be a normal morning of someone sitting down for breakfast. Oh my god! Yeah, anyway, we see a familiar man in a cab heading towards the town. I suppose I should go ahead and talk about the change in art style from previous parts. During the manga, the art style transitioned from the angular look to a more rounded one that would be more or less the standard for the next few parts. And while the anime takes elements of that style, it seems to more lean to the midpoint of the arc rather than the end. The art style doesn't look worse by any means, though personally I feel like the lighter shading on some of the characters, particularly the faces, takes away a bit from the signature Jojo style we've all grown accustomed to at this point. Dating back to the synopsis, we get some narration from a kid named Koichi talking about his first day of high school when he bumps into the now white-clad Jojo because I guess he was too busy narrating to avoid the extremely large man. Jojo asks Koichi for directions to the residence of the Higashikata family, and after helping him, Koichi narrates that Jojo has become a marine biologist since the ending of Part 3, because he showed so much love for marine life before. Some other classmen harass Koichi and his groveling satisfies them, but when they go bully another student whose uniform is inexplicably a different color, they go into full asshole mode, even injuring a helpless turtle. The student reveals his name to be Josuke Higashikata, and from an alternate reading of his name, he's called Jojo, a nickname that's now more obligatory than anything else, especially since this is literally the only time he's ever called that. As the bullies mock him some more, one of them insults Josuke's hair, and that's evidently his trigger as he suddenly goes from groveling like Koichi to beating up the bullies with a stand that he just kind of has. Josuke's stand ability is to heal things, managing to heal both the turtle and the bully, though the bully's face doesn't heal quite right, messing his face up, but good. Jojo approaches Josuke and spouts off his whole life story and says that Josuke is the illegitimate child of Joseph, who apparently cheated on his wife at some point, which is pretty scummy, but Part 4 is good enough that we could probably forgive him for it. Maybe. The exposition continues as Jojo says he came to discuss how Joseph's inheritance will get sorted out, what with Josuke being his son-in-law. Josuke apologizes for the trouble, much to the confusion of Jotaro, and Josuke is approached by several girls. Jotaro gets his attention back by activating his trigger, resulting in a brief scuffle between the two. Jotaro obviously wins because Star Platinum is overpowered, but his hat did not make it out unscathed. Jotaro delivers yet more exposition, now about a dangerous stand user in Morio that appeared in Joseph's spirit photos, an escaped criminal known as Angelo. Josuke and Koichi head off to school, and we cut to a woman, Josuke's mother, getting hit on by some jerk, but she's not taking any of that, breaking his face on a car. A nearby police officer, who is her father, ignores his assault complaints because why wouldn't they? After school, Josuke is walking home with Koichi, who has become the millhouse to his Bart, and they come across a hostage situation. And wouldn't you know it, the guy decides to insult Josuke's hair, which results in him using his stand to deal with the robber and save the hostage without injuring her.
Hooray!
However, the robber was actually possessed by the stand that Jotaro had been looking for, Aqua Necklace. Jotaro calls Josuke from the hotel room he's going to be spending most of his time in, and the two exchange information. Angelo himself is watching their house disguised as a milkman, and after killing a man in what must be the 100th dog to die in this series, sends his stand into the house. After finishing up their conversation, Josuke sees that Aqua Necklace is inside his mother, and manages to quite violently remove it from her, causing no permanent damage, with her somehow being none the wiser and trapping Aqua Necklace. We find out from Angelo's narration that Josuke's grandfather was one of the many officers who had arrested him in his life.
Heavens to Betsy, what are the odds?
Angelo manages to disguise his stand to trick Josuke's grandfather, allowing Angelo to kill him. Josuke tries to heal his grandfather, but unfortunately it doesn't work, and Jotaro says something that's kind of hypocritical.
だが、生命が終わったものはもう戻らない。どんなスタンドだろうと戻せない。
So if there were any dead vampires around, would he have a different attitude about that? After all of the funeral proceedings, Josuke's mom goes to stay with a relative of hers so she can conveniently not be present for any of the action. Also, Josuke can't heal himself with his stand because we need to wait a part before the main character can use a plot convenience power again. Later, Angelo sends his stand into the house again. Why he waited so long, I have no idea, and decides to run up their water bill. As the two Jojos try to think of a way to defeat Angelo, Aqua Necklace manages to get inside of Josuke, but he had a plan for that, managing to trap the stand inside a rubber glove he'd swallowed earlier. They get Angelo cornered and he mocks them, leading to Josuke sealing him inside of a rock, which will now be called the Angelo Stone, as the narrator tells us is to be the first of many landmarks seen in this part. After being fused with a rock, Angelo decides to tell our heroes that there's another stand user who also knows about Dio and Mario, who gave him his stand power a year prior using some kind of arrow that, instead of killing him, gave him superpowers. Before he can exposit even further, he uses Josuke's trigger and gets rockified even more. Though with the introduction of the bow and arrow, we now have an explanation as to how Dio obtained his stand in part 3. Later, when Koichi and Josuke are on their way home, Koichi sees a figure in an old house near Josuke's and gets assaulted by its new occupant, Okuyasu Nijimura. Okuyasu and Josuke yell at each other, and during their exchange, Okuyasu's brother Keicho shoots Koichi with the arrow that had just been used on Angela, revealing that not only is he the one Josuke was looking for, but that they are both stand users as well. Josuke tries to help Koichi, but Okuyasu attacks him with his own stand, the hand, which has the power to scrape away space, allowing him to basically yo-yo Josuke by punching him in the face a lot. He ends up doing that one too many times though and gets assaulted by some potted plants. Before Josuke can celebrate his victory, Keicho drags Koichi into the house preparing to confront Josuke. As Keicho launches his attack on Josuke, Okuyasu comes back but ends up taking Keicho's assault to the face. Keicho berates his brother for his lack of intelligence and tries attacking Josuke again, but he's a Joestar through and through and uses the secret technique to get himself and the injured Nijimura out of the line of fire. Keicho retreats further into the house, dragging the still injured Koichi with him. Josuke heals Okuyasu and goes in to save Koichi. Josuke ends up having to walk into a trap, but is actually saved by Okuyasu using the hand to retrieve Koichi in order to repay Josuke for saving him. Josuke is able to heal Koichi, but gets confronted by Keicho's stand, Bad Company, which is shown to be a miniature army and the first of a new type of group stand, which I feel like is pretty self-explanatory. Despite their size, the weapons Bad Company has pack a large amount of firepower, helped by them having tiny vehicles as well. At the behest of Keicho, Koichi, who is now a stand user, attempts to summon his stand, which he manages to do, and it's an egg. Keicho assaults Josuke some more, but he manages to counterattack at the last second, reforming some of Bad Company's missiles and sending them back at Keicho, because I guess he can do that now. Josuke and Koichi decide to go looking for the bow and arrow, which are luckily in the first room they check, but there's also some weird green creature that's chained to the wall. Keicho comes in and informs the two that the creature is actually his mutated father and how he'd been using the bow and arrow to try to get a stand user who can end his father's life. He goes on to explain that his dad had some role in working under Dio, which granted him wealth, but after Dio's defeat, the flesh bud that was in him caused the transformation to what he is now. Keicho also says that he later learned about the events of Part 3 and got the bow and arrow. Somehow. Then, just to be a dick, he assaults his father for little reason other than his fiddling with some scraps of what Josuke reveals to be an old family photo. Josuke offers to assist Keicho if he instead decides to look for a stand user to cure his father. Okuyasu tries to convince him to go along with that, but Keicho refuses. Before any of them can come to a decision, an electrical stand emerges from an outlet named Red Hot Chili Pepper, because that name just screams electricity. It's able to pull Keicho as well as the bow and arrow into the power outlet with him, and when Josuke and Okuyasu try looking for the user, they see Keicho dead. Okuyasu admits that his brother probably deserved that given the type of person he was, but is saddened nonetheless. The user of Red Hot Chili Pepper, who I'll call Al for now, then calls Jojo to threaten him, somehow knowing who he is and what his stand can do. The next day, Okuyasu goes to visit Josuke at his house before school, acting like they're best friends despite having tried to murder him before. Okuyasu also makes a remark about how hot Josuke's mom is, which since so many people say that, makes it totally okay that Joseph cheated on his wife with her. Later, Koichi is riding his bike to school when he runs over a bag that was left in the middle of the road, crashing. He thinks that he ran over a cat that was in the bag, but a nearby man on a bench tells him that it's not his fault and tries to get friendly with Koichi, which totally isn't creepy at all. The man, Kobayashi, changes his tune though to try to get money out of Koichi, saying that it was his cat that Koichi killed. Turns out that he has a stand though, which looks like some sort of lock named, well, the lock that appears in Koichi's chest, which physically weighs him down in proportion to his guilt. Why Koichi still feels this way despite this guy clearly being a con artist, I have no idea. But don't worry, Josuke and Okuyasu are here to actually try to do something. Okuyasu punches Kobayashi in the face, but he plays up going so far as to cause his own tooth to get knocked out, which Okuyasu ends up falling for. Josuke discovers that the kitten was actually just a toy, fixes Kobayashi's tooth, and scares him off, though he manages to get away with Koichi's money. That evening, when Koichi gets home from school, he sees that Kobayashi is in his house, because apparently he has nothing better to do than to screw with slow-witted high schoolers. This time he tries to get 50,000 yen from Koichi, and when Koichi tells his mom the guy's a con artist, she doesn't believe him because I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the stupid tree. Kobayashi intends to fuck with Koichi's whole family, which sets him off, causing his eggs to hatch into a real stand, attacking Kobayashi, but it's too weak to actually do anything. Instead, it puts sound effects on Kobayashi's arm that reverberate inside of him. This almost works, but Kobayashi is the stubborn kind of asshole and actually stabs himself, making it look like Koichi did it. This causes Mom to feel more guilt, and she almost kills herself, but using his stand's new power, Koichi manages to get through to his mother to get her to stop being such an idiot, and she overcomes the lock's power. Kobayashi then starts cowering to Koichi, vowing to become his servant. Later, Josuke and Koichi are talking to Kobayashi, and he informs them that there's another student at their school, Hazamada, who is also a stand user who had somehow managed to force a classmate of his to stab himself with a pen. Josuke and Koichi go around their school looking for him, where it should be mentioned that Josuke and Okuyasu are for some reason the only ones with blue uniforms to everyone else's green. Why the animators chose to do this when both the manga colorizations and the games didn't, I have no idea. Josuke looks in Hazamada's locker for clues to his whereabouts, but only finds a wooden mannequin which turns into a duplicate of Josuke. Josuke tries to attack it, but any move made by the duplicate is forced to be done by the original. Hazamada said his stand, named Surface, is manifest into a physical object, allowing it to be seen by non-stand users, as well as wanting to get rid of Jojo, whom he somehow knows about. This makes me wonder how many people actually know about what happened in Part 3 and how widely available that information is. Josuke is forced to seemingly stab himself with a pen, and Hazamada leaves to find Jotaro. On the way, he harasses some bikers, but stops when Koichi and Josuke manage to catch up to him. Hazamada takes a detour when they hear a passing train, but it was just a trick by Koichi so he and Josuke could get to Jotaro first. Josuke ends up under Surface's control again, but is saved when the bikers from earlier catch up to Hazamada and start beating him up.
Oh, well, isn't that convenient?
The next day, time in this part isn't super clear, while Josuke and Okuyasu are walking around, they see Koichi at a cafe with a girl from their school named Yukiko Yamagishi. The two have more awkward conversation, which leads to Yukiko flipping out on a flustered Koichi, embarrassing her, and she runs away. The next day at school, Yukiko approaches Koichi and apologizes, which he accepts, but things turn weird again when she reveals to have made him an exact fitting sweater and made him a very elaborate lunch. Before things can get any worse, a classmate comes in and interrupts them, telling Koichi about his class duties. This turns out to be poor timing for her though, as Yukiko threatens her and it turns out she's a stand user, hers called Love Deluxe, allowing her to manipulate her hair like that one chick from the Inhumans. Did anyone actually watch that, by the way? Failed Marvel shows aside, that night Koichi is in bed and Yukiko breaks into his window and kidnaps him. A part of his time as a hostage involves Yukiko forcing him to study English due to a test she saw that he had failed. When Yukiko steps outside and uses a nearby payphone, Koichi manages to use a stand to contact Josuke. Koichi barricades the door, and when Yukiko tries to get back in, he uses echoes to try to fend her off, but she manages to out-crazy his sound ability. Yukiko starts to force her way in, and Echoes just kinda turns to stone. Before Yukiko can finish getting in, Echoes breaks out of its stone shell in a new form and quite literally blows Yukiko away.
He blows alright, he blows big time.
With its new form, Act 2, Echo's words now have physical effects instead of just auditory. Yukiko grabs Koichi, but he manages to launch her to a cliff edge, her hair having changed color for some reason. Luckily for Koichi though, the cliff crumbles away with her on it, and Koichi uses sound abilities to make a rock bounce her back to safety. This gesture causes Yukiko to give in as Josuke and Okuyasu finally show up in the nick of time to basically see everything resolved. Later, Okuyasu and Josuke go to a new Italian restaurant that has just opened, run by an Italian man named Tonio, who instead of a menu serves food based on the customer. He manages to pull a Sherlock on Okuyasu, deducing sleep and physical issues that he has had.
I know you're an army doctor and you've been invalided home from Afghanistan. I know you've got a brother who's worried about you, but you won't go to him for help because you don't approve of him, possibly because he's an alcoholic, more likely because he recently walked out on his wife, and I know that your therapist thinks you're limp psychosomatic, quite correctly, I'm afraid.
The two clearly begin enjoying their time there, as simply the taste of the water is enough to warrant praise from Okuyasu and Josuke, causing tears to literally gush from Okuyasu's eyes, which the chef says is normal due to it being imported. Because, you know, that happens everywhere, just because it's not from my country. Though after the tears subside, Okuyasu actually manages to feel as though he had a full night's sleep. Well, now I wish that imported water actually worked like that. I'd get me a shitload. The also delicious salad manages to have curative powers as well, curing Okuyasu's stiff shoulder, which involves him scratching off a disturbing amount of skin, causing him to feel even better than before, which arouses suspicion in Josuke, and yet somehow not Okuyasu. The next course is a type of spaghetti, and Josuke relays his suspicion to Okuyasu, who is unable to stop himself from eating it, leading to several bad teeth shooting from Okuyasu's mouth, getting replaced by perfect ones.
So long, dental plan!
Josuke uses Crazy Diamond to uncook the spaghetti because the stand can do that now too, revealing tiny stand entities and confirming Josuke's suspicions about Tonio. Josuke goes to search for him in the kitchen and sees Tonio feeding something to a dog, which then seems to do that thing that dogs in this series always do. Tonio then confronts Josuke, forcing him to clean his entire kitchen, and we see that both Okuyasu and the dog are actually perfectly fine. Tonio goes on to explain that his stand Pearl Jam simply enhances his food and gives it curative powers. This little adventure was fun, and it's nice to see a stand user who shows up outside of the protagonist group who who's not evil. While at home, Josuke is threatened by Red Hot Chili Pepper, saying that he knows all about all the stand users in town and plans to kill Josuke. This only ends up getting him beaten up by Josuke, though he still manages to get away. The next day, Okuyasu, Koichi, and Josuke go out to a field to meet Jotaro and discuss how to defeat Red Hot Chili Pepper. Jotaro tells them that the plan is to use Joseph's Hermit Purple, him arriving the next day, in order to find Al. It turns out Red Hot Chili Pepper hid inside Okuyasu's bike and plans to go kill Joseph so they won't be able to find him. As he tries to get away, Okuyasu uses the hand to catch up and manages to get the stand in a tight spot, and it's unable to get away without power lines. Okuyasu offers to spare Chili Pepper if it reveals Al's location, but it provokes him and he attacks, swiping at an underground cable which allows Chili Pepper to power up again and escape. The group head to the port, getting to Joseph before Chili Pepper, and Jotaro takes Okuyasu on a speedboat out to Joseph's while Josuke and Koichi stay at the port to look for Al. Red Hot Chili Pepper arrives and the user reveals himself as this guy.
名前は音石明19歳このギターは気にしないでくれ
Yeah, it turns out he's actually pretty lame. Josuke breaks his finger and Otoshi responds to this by playing a guitar solo that ends with him making this face. You know, like you do. Josuke plays Whack-A-Stand for a bit and Koichi just kind of stands there instead of doing, well, anything. Josuke manages to land a hit on Red Hot Chili Pepper, and Otoshi juices his stand up to the max, allowing it to overpower Josuke, and Koichi still just kinda stands there. Before Otoshi can kill Josuke, he manages to seal his stand in a tire, sending it into the ocean, causing his stand to fall to pieces, but not Otoshi himself for some reason. Koichi decides to actually do something and tell Jotaro about Otoshi's defeat. Okuyasu has some banter with the apparently senile Joseph, and Josuke is not very enthused about meeting his father. Koichi notices that Otoshi is gone and somehow has gotten onto the boat. He tries to convince Okuyasu that another guy is actually the enemy, but I'm mostly wondering why he's still trying to kill Joseph when he's already told Josuke and Koichi who he is, thus negating the reason he was going to kill Joseph in the first place. Ultimately, Okuyasu chooses to punch the right one, and when they explain his reasoning, the show plays it as him being an idiot, though I feel like it was actually a pretty good idea.
二人ともぶん殴るつもりだったんだよ俺頭悪いからよ
Joseph gets off the boat and meets Josuke, who helps him along due to his cane he doesn't seem to need later, having been broken earlier during the scuffle. And as Jotaro reflects on how safe the town is now, we see the person from the opening scene with another severed hand. Jotaro ends up finding the bow and arrow, and we see that Otoshi has been arrested. Josuke takes Joseph to see his mother, and we get some more antics about Joseph being old. While they're out, they encounter an invisible baby stand user that's picked up by Joseph, leading to more shenanigans. Some of those including Joseph trying to buy supplies to take care of the child and spend all of Josuke's money. They manage to cover up the fact that the baby is invisible, but the clothes in Joseph's hands start turning invisible as well. While they try to figure out what to do, the baby turns her stroller invisible as well, which of course leads to a runaway stroller moment that causes the baby to land in a nearby pond. As Josuke struggles to find her, Joseph decides to use his own blood to add color to the water so that Josuke can see the baby, an act that gives Josuke a newfound respect for his father. And if you're wondering, no, we never actually get to see Joseph interact with Josuke's mom, despite that having been the catalyst for the events of this entire episode. Later on, we see Koichi walking home, and he runs into a less crazy Hazamada, who tells Koichi that a famous manga artist, Rohan Kashibe, who's totally not an opera insert at all, has moved into Morio, and the two decide just to go to his house, which I'm sure famous people just love when fans do that. The two briefly gush about how great he is, and when Koichi goes to ring his doorbell, this happens. He welcomes them in, and there's more talk about how he's such a great manga artist and is good at everything, but that comes to a halt when he picks up a spider, stabs it, and starts licking it. Koichi says they should leave, but Hazamada wants to look at the manuscript for the next chapter of Rohan's manga. This causes some weird vibes to come off it, and Rohan returns, revealing that he is a stand user. The bodies of the two open up like they're made of books, allowing Rohan to read their lives. When he looks over Koichi, he becomes enthralled by, well, the events of Part 4 up to now. Just wait until he gets to Part 7, that's where the best stuff is. Koichi tries attacking him with echoes, but is unable to, as Rohan's ability also allows him to write in someone's pages and control their actions. Rohan talks more about himself before ripping out one of Koichi's pages, going so far as to laugh maniacally while doing it. Later we see the two leaving, believing that they had a wonderful time there. The next day, Koichi is compelled to return to Rohan's house, but luckily Josuke and Okuyasu are there to see him enter. Rohan shows off supernatural art skills that are just unrelated to his stand ability, managing to super speed an ultra-detailed page just by kind of flinging his pen around. He then proceeds to take more from Koichi, but is interrupted by Josuke and Okuyasu at his door. Koichi attempts to go alert them as to what's happening, but is still under Rohan's power. Josuke and Okuyasu leave, thinking that nothing was wrong, and Koichi resigns to his fate. Okuyasu ends up coming through, though, as he and Josuke figured out something was wrong. Okuyasu attacks Rohan, but is stopped by Heaven's Door. Josuke hangs back, attempting to think of a plan, as Rohan monologues some more. Rohan uses Heaven's Door to make Okuyasu kill himself if Josuke ever tries to go get help, forcing him to confront Rohan with his eyes closed. Rohan activates Josuke's trigger by making fun of his hair, causing him to open his eyes, but Heaven's Door ends up failing due to Josuke having been literally blinded with rage.
And Island Rhythms.
Koichi's pages return and he tells Okuyasu the backstory behind Josuke's hair. That being, during the events of Stardust Crusaders, young Josuke had stand sickness and his mother's car was stuck in the snow trying to get him to a hospital. Fortunately, a beaten-up looking guy who bears a striking resemblance to Josuke helps get them unstuck. When they tried to find the mystery guy, he seemingly never existed at all. Though, with that being the case, Josuke decided to honor him by taking his hairstyle. Then Rohan starts talking about how that would make a great story for a manga, only for Josuke to start beating him up some more. Later, Jojo brings Josuke to search for a rat that had apparently been hit with the stand arrow, because if we can have dogs and birds with stands, why not rats too? Jotaro's plan for getting the rat is for he and Josuke to use their stands to flick ball bearings at it like they're firing bullets. After Josuke misses during target practice, Jotaro chews him out with an extended pointing session. The two go look for the rat, and Jotaro is apparently an expert in not only fish but rats as well, as he lays down some serious rat facts. While setting up traps for it, they stumble upon a cube of gooified rat corpses that were killed by the rat's stand. They begin to worry when they see a nearby house that looks suspiciously empty. They investigate, and Josuke finds the rat in the kitchen, it having gooed the homeowners and somehow put them in the fridge. Josuke attacks the rat, but doesn't kill it, and it fights back using its own stand, which is some kind of weird dart gun. The rat dies shortly after, and Jotaro reveals that there are actually two stand rats with the exact same stand. They go to find the second rat, and Jotaro says that they need to up their game by flicking actual bullets this time. They get to a hillside where they believe the rat is, and at this point I can only assume gaining stands make animals smarter because it has set traps for them. Jotaro decides to use himself to lure the rat out since, well, Josuke can just heal him later, and Jotaro actually gets hit by the rat's attacks, but Josuke does manage to kill it with little trouble. Ultimately, this little adventure was kind of dumb and accomplished basically nothing in the larger narrative, as well as making Jotaro look significantly lamer due to how easily he let himself be attacked by a rat. The next episode we see Rohan again, now having become less crazy since being beaten up by Josuke, wanting Koichi to try to help him find his childhood home. The reason he needs help is due to there being an alley he's come across that isn't on any of the maps of the town. The two decide to go down the alley and find a rundown residential area that loops in on itself. When Koichi tries to use echoes to get an aerial view, it's stopped by some sort of invisible barrier. A girl approaches them and Rohan demonstrates that he can now use Heaven's Door by simply scribbling in the air. We find out that the girl's name is Reimi Sugimoto and she offers to help them get out of the residential area. At first she seems normal enough, but for some reason she tells them about a murder that happened in one of the houses that's just a straight up retelling of the urban legend, the one with the dog and the guy under the bed or whatever. Yeah, you know the one. Though if you're going to use an urban legend for your story, I would recommend this one.
And then, while they sat helplessly around the campfire, a demented, knife-wielding, escaped lunatic, libertarian, zombie mutant snuck up and...
It turns out that Reimi and her dog are ghosts and the alley is like purgatory or something. Reimi goes on to explain that the person who killed her is still on the loose in Morio and wants Rohan and Koichi to try to find him. The two agree to help and Reimi shows them the way out, which involves being followed by an evil presence that if you turn around to face it, you die. The two manage to make it out and Rohan later tracks down her family's grave. An old man at the graveyard tells Rohan that he was actually there the night of the murder when he was very young, as her family had been watching him while his parents were out.
Isn't that convenient?
Later, Koichi is talking to Okuyasu and Josuke about the situation, Koichi almost getting himself hit by a car driven by some guy who, kinda looks like David Bowie. The guy simply drives off looking annoyed, and for whatever reason we follow this random dude as he talks to some woman about some random crap or whatever.
Oh my god!
Back to a few light-hearted antics, Josuke is worried about being broke when he sees a small stand grab a coin and run off. He gives chase, seeing more of them show up, and is joined by Okuyasu, who is also chasing one of them, coincidentally.
Well, how convenient.
They follow the stand back to its user where they pile up several coins that they collected. The user introduces himself as Shigekio, or Shigechi as he'll most often be referred to. He tells the two heroes that he uses the stand to harvest to collect lost change, something they praise as a really good idea. Shigechi offers to give some of the money to Josuke and Okuyasu, but Josuke says his pride won't let him do that. However, he comes with an idea to benefit all three of them. He says that they could use harvest to collect discarded store vouchers and exchange them for money. This actually manages to work and they get their money, though Shigechi begins to act stingy, a recurring trait that will be the main conflict of this episode. The next scheme involves sorting through discarded lottery tickets, which actually manages to work, and Okuyasu finds a winning ticket for 5 million yen. They go claim their prize, but the lottery commissioner is suspicious of them, but Josuke manages to solve the issue and they receive their voucher. Shigechi begins acting like a dick again, and despite the fact that Josuke and Okuyasu are still willing to give him a majority, he attacks the two and runs off. They give chase, and after catching up to him, he attacks them again. They manage to get the voucher back, and Josuke rips it up and spreads it in the wind, and Shigechi sending Harvest to retrieve them. They confront Shigechi directly, and he ends up apologizing. The two still split it with Shigechi, though now in an even thirds, despite what he's done. And in the end, they do get their money.
Hooray!
This episode probably didn't need to be 2 parts, and the conflict only happened because Shigechi was being a douchebag. Overall, aside from the introduction of a new character, and the whole lottery thing has basically no impact on the larger story, and probably would have been better spent on an adventure that more appropriately introduced Shigechi as a character. The next episode has more antics as we see Yukiko still upset that Koichi isn't into her, as he comes across a salon that says it will help people find love.
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
Yukiko enters and is persuaded by the owner Ayatsuji to pay for their services. When she begins, it's shown that her claims may not be just a sales tactic, as she is also a stand user. Yukiko runs into Koichi afterwards, and he surprisingly acts friendly to her, even going with her to get some food, making her ecstatic. When the effects of the service wear off, she returns to the salon to confront Aya about its time limit. Aya talks to her about admiration for Cinderella's fairy godmother and convinces Yukiko to get another makeover. At first it seems to work on Koichi, but the entire cast decides to show up and hang out, though it comes back around and Koichi falls for it. Koichi later tells Josuke and Okuyasu about him being into Yukiko now, as well as the fact that she hasn't been seen in a few days. He runs into Yukiko in the street later, now looking deformed, her telling Koichi that he has the wrong person. She confronts Ai again, but begins disintegrating. Koichi arrives to attempt to defuse the situation, and Ai offers to fix her only if she figures out which eyeliner is hers out of a selection presented, a wrong choice causing her to look worse. This is probably a bad idea on her part, given that Yukiko was about to kill her just moments ago, but she decides to go along with it, so whatever. Yukiko ends up having Koichi choose for her, and he offers to blind himself if he picks wrong, which he actually did, but Aya fixes Yukiko's face anyway because she was moved by the insanity, I mean love. Yeah, that's it. Next we get back to the plot as we check in on the neighborhood serial killer Yoshikage Kira going about his daily routine. By some miraculous coincidence, he's eating his lunch in the same park that Josuke, Okuyasu, and unfortunately Shigechi are walking through. They talk about how desirable the sandwiches from the shop that Kira had just been St. Gentleman's are, and a dog ends up stealing the bag that Shigechi's is in. When searching for it, he confuses Kira's bag, which contains a severed hand, for his own and makes off with it. Kira follows the three to attempt to retrieve the bag, but circumstances can generally make it difficult for him. He even ends up having to hide in some sports equipment at their school, apparently having impeccable speed when doing so. Kira ultimately manages to retrieve the bag and departs believing that he had gotten off again. As he is leaving, however, Shigechi spots him recognizing the bag and attempts to get it back. During the struggle, the bag is ripped open and the hand flies out. Kira reveals that he is a stand user and now plans to kill Shigechi because he's seen too much. But not before telling his life story because reasons, I guess. He finishes his ramble by bringing out his stand, Killer Queen. Shigechi responds by attacking with Harvest, but Kira counters with Killer Queen's ability, which can turn anything into a bomb, blowing up a coin in Shigechi's face. Shigechi manages to survive though and uses Harvest to escape. As the injured Shigechi limps through the school and no one decides to help him because they're assholes apparently, Shigechi reaches the room where Josuke and Okuyasu are, but unfortunately Kira is already there and kills Shigechi with an explosion, leaving nothing behind. A single Harvest manages to linger long enough to give a button from Kira's jacket to Josuke and Okuyasu before it too explodes. Later, all of the stand users gather at the alleyway and Raimi confirms that she saw Shigechi's spirit passing to the other side. Later on, Koichi runs to Jojo, who's having no luck tracking down Kira. As the two are walking, they happen upon a shoe store that also does tailoring. Luckily, it's the place that Kira went to get his jacket fixed. Unluckily, the store owner is killed before he can give them his information. Kira, in this instance, is using a secondary power he has, which allows him to shoot a little tank out of Killer Queen's hand that also causes things to explode, referred to as Killer Queen's second bomb, Sheer Heart Attack. Jojo then plays detective for a bit and manages to deduce a large amount of information from just having seen Kira's jacket. They get attacked by Sheer Heart Attack attack again, and Jotaro attacks with Star Platinum, but it's extremely durable, managing to withstand several auras with little damage. Koichi ends up doing something that gets Jotaro severely injured, and he pulls Jotaro to a safer location using echoes to distract Sheer Heart Attack long enough to contact Josuke. The distraction doesn't last though, and it pursues them again. Fortunately, Echoes obtains a new form, Act 3, which can talk.
SHIT.
Its new power set is pretty vague, but it is able to make things heavier. I have no idea how that means make things heavier, but sure. Elsewhere, Kira's hand is being affected by the increased weight, prompting him to return to the shoe store. Once he arrives, Kira begins monologuing to Koichi, and Koichi attacks, but isn't a match for Killer Queen. Kira pummels Koichi for a bit, all while monologuing to him about his life. Koichi manages to get Kira's wallet and learns his name and taunts him despite having lost. Kira's OCD gets the better of him, and he corrects Koichi's inside-out sock before finishing him off. Before that can happen, though, Jotaro remembers how to shrug off severe injury and attacks Kira himself with an aura before collapsing again. Shortly thereafter, Josuke and Okuyasu arrive on the scene. Kira attempts to bluff his way out of the situation, but Josuke sees right through it. Kira then cuts off his own hand and flees, sending Sheer Heart Attack after them. But Josuke instead heals it, and our heroes follow the severed hand back to Kira, who had gone to the Cinderella salon. Inside, they find Kira's belongings, Aya injured, and another man dead, his face missing. Aya explodes, and our heroes are unable to catch up to the hand as Kira manages to escape wearing another man's face. Next, we see a woman lamenting about how dissatisfied she is with her boring life when her husband arrives and begins to make them dinner, an uncharacteristic behavior for it. Before we can see where that goes, we catch up with our heroes who are investigating Kira's house, hoping to find out more about him. They learn that Kira had spent most of his life being an unimpressive and boring individual, having next to no qualities that could cause him to stand out from a crowd. Except, of course, the desire to save all his nail clippings for some reason, him even keeping records of their growth back to the time he murdered Raimi. As Josuke and Jotaro are discussing this, a Polaroid camera snaps their picture. The photo reveals an image of Kira's father, Yoshihiro, behind them, who, like Raimi, is a ghost and plans to kill them to protect Kira. They're unable to actually see Yoshihiro himself, but can see his movements in the photo, which can be used to affect them as well. Another effect of this is the area where the photo's borders are cut off from reality. Before Yoshihiro is able to do any harm, though, Jotaro takes a picture of their picture, isolating Yoshihiro in the frame and trapping him. That doesn't end up lasting long, however, as he tricks Okuyasu into allowing him to escape. Sort of. I say sort of because he's still inside the photo, but still fully mobile as he can apparently partially manifest outside of it. This happens just as Josuke finds the second stand arrow that is immediately taken by Yoshihiro, and he flies away by lassoing a bird. As he flees, Yoshihiro exposits that he intends to use the air to create more stand users to fight against them. Checking back in with the woman Shinobu Kawajiri and her husband Kosaku, we see that she enjoys the meal that he prepared for her. The next morning, though, her mood is soured again when we see that their cat had been shut out of the house all night by Kosaku. He apologizes, and she thinks to herself about the unusual behavior he'd been exhibiting since the previous night. This continues when their landlord arrives demanding their late rent. Kosaku manifests Killer Queen, confirming that this is the new identity Kira had taken on. He uses his stand to swipe some cash from the landlord's bag and make him believe that he's paying for the next several months' worth of rent in advance. Shinobu realizes that he somehow stole the money, but is actually attracted to him by the gesture. The next day, we see Rohan taking pictures of random guys in an attempt to figure out whose identity Kira had stolen when he runs into Joseph. And since this scene involves both Joseph and photographs, I'll discuss the plot hole of why they can't just have Joseph use Hermit Pulveral to track down Kira. While many people have presented possible answers for this, there isn't an official explanation, and this video isn't necessarily about speculating, so I'll just say that if that hadn't happened, a lot of my favorite moments of this part wouldn't have happened either, so in the long run, it doesn't hurt the story that much. Kind of. But anyway, back at the plot, a kid comes up and begins bothering Rohan about playing rock, paper, scissors, or Jenkin with him. Rohan ignores him, and he and Joseph just walk away. Later, though, he approaches Rohan again about playing with him, and Rohan notices the kid has a hole in his cheek. Wondering if the kid might be a stand user, Rohan uses Heaven's Door on him and finds nothing about him being a stand user. He ends up playing with and beating the kid, Ken, due to the knowledge that he got from Heaven's Door before departing. The kid comes back again later at a cafe to bother Rohan some more, and Rohan wins against playing him again. Ken comes to annoy Rohan again about playing Jenkin, this time winning, and it's revealed that he actually is a stand user and begins attacking Rohan, but he counters with Heaven's Door and learns that his stand name is Boy to Man.
Boy.
Ken awakens, explaining that he's taken 1/3 of Rohan's stand power as Rohan is forced to play with the kid 2 more times. Ken wins the first of the 2, and he and Rohan begin attempting to psych each other out with long-winded speeches. They end up tying a couple times and see Josuke and Joseph walking by. During the last play, Rohan manages to win using the invisible baby to make the kid play rock. Rohan attempts to use Heaven's Door to prevent Ken from being able to use his stand again, but he decides to jump in front of a truck. Rohan ends up saving the kid and tells him to stop being evil. Great advice, Rohan, especially coming from you. Later, we see Yoshihiro flying through the air with the stand arrow and attempts to throw it at someone someone, but for some reason the arrow just bounces off him. That evening we see Kira practicing emulating the handwriting of the man whose identity is assumed. Shinobu comes in, and after what I'll just call a misunderstanding, she only finds herself infatuated with him more, and we see that for some reason there's a camera in their ceiling. The next day, Josuke and Okuyasu come across a small crop circle and find the guy hit with the arrow before unconscious in the center. He wakes up and begins asking the two a series of questions that make them think he's a prankster. The guy continues to insist that he's an alien, exhibiting behaviors that imply that he at least believes himself to be one. The guy follows them and offers them a plastic-wrapped ice cream from his bag, telling them about his alien past, including that his name is Mikitaka. The two interrogate him more, wondering if he is a stand user, but he continues to tell them that he's an alien. Their conversation is cut short when fire trucks go by, causing Mikitaka distress, saying that he's allergic to the sound. Okuyasu decides to just leave him, but Josuke checks to see if he's okay, and Mikitaka turns into sneakers that allow Josuke to jump great distances. Josuke brings out Crazy Diamond, but Mikitaka is unable to see it, making it seem as though he may actually be an alien. To repay Josuke for helping him get away from the silence, he offers to help him do any one favor, to which Josuke agrees. Josuke comes up with a plan that involves Mikitaka turning into dice and then gambling with Rohan using Mikitaka to rig the game, since his mother had frozen his bank account with his earlier lottery winnings. This manages to work for a moment, but Rohan begins getting suspicious due to the amount Josuke is winning, even calling Kobayashi to come over and act as a judge. Fortunately for Josuke, it turns out Rohan's house caught on fire, giving him a distraction before Rohan was able to figure out what Josuke was doing. Back at the Kawajiri household, we see that the son Hayato is a freak in his own right, as the camera in his parents' room belongs to him. Enough about that for now, though. Josuke runs into Mikitaka again, but also a woman who says she's his mother, who says he needs to stop telling people that he's an alien, though Mikitaka tells Josuke that he's only made her believe she was his mother while he's on Earth, much to the confusion of Josuke and the nearby Yoshihiro. Do I believe he's an alien? Well, like with the plot hole, we are never given an official answer, though personally I think it's more fun if he actually is an alien, and there is a good bit of evidence to support him actually being one, although that could be easily chalked up to him being just crazy. Enough about that though, we cut to Josuke getting on a bus that Rohan also happens to be on, and the tensions are high between the two. As the bus passes through a tunnel, Rohan sees a room that seems to have Kira in it cutting off a woman's hand. He attempts to tell Josuke about it, but Josuke is skeptical. Rohan goes to investigate himself on a motorcycle that he just has now, and actually managed to stumble into the room from earlier. Here's something in the room and begins fleeing on his bike, concluding that the room was an illusion made to trap him. The thing chasing him, which turns out to be a bunch of feet, catch up to him and begin sucking out his nutrients. The feet form together into a full stand named Highway Star, and Josuke arrives to attempt to help Rohan, Highway Star having drug him into the room to attempt to bait Josuke. Rohan tries to warn Josuke to run, but Josuke enters anyway to attempt to draw the enemy out. Highway Star attacks Josuke, but Rohan uses Heaven's Door to save him. Josuke takes Rohan's bike and begins to search for the stand user and avoid the pursuing Highway Star. Josuke steals a guy's cell phone and calls Koichi to try to get some information that could lead him to the stand user. Koichi finds out that the user is most likely a person who got into a motorcycle accident in the tunnel recently, and Josuke, after briefly delaying Highway Star, heads to the hospital to search for the user. As Josuke closes in on the user, Highway Star catches up to him and begins draining him. The user, Yuya Fugiyami, turns out to be also a hit with the ladies, as he has a few of them at his bedside tending to him. Josuke manages to recover though, having used some IV fluid to recover his strength. Yuya pleads with Josuke since he is injured, to which Josuke agrees, simply healing Yuya's injuries only to immediately injure him some more with Crazy Diamond. Back once again at the Kawajiri household, Hayato is still suspicious of Kira, and a stray cat has found its way into their basement, their own cat having already disappeared from the story entirely. The cat wasn't a friendly one though, and Shinobu swung a broom around in an attempt to get rid of it, causing shards of glass to fall on and kill it. Kira buries it in their backyard, and a few days later an ugly flower with eyes springs up, and narration informs us that it's somehow a reincarnation of the cat from before, which also has a stand ability. The plant cat takes a liking to Kira, though it has a persistent grudge against Shinobu. The plant cat's stand ability has to do with air and shooting pressurized air bubbles at its enemies. The plant cat ends up fighting Kira and is surprisingly formidable, though Kira manages to subdue it and hides it away. Shinobu is still infatuated with Kira, and Hayato continues to investigate him. This leads him to the attic where he finds the plant cat, which apparently falls asleep when not in sunlight. Kira returns, now being on to Hayato, who gets attacked by what, for the time being, I'll call the plant. He manages to cover his tracks and hide just as Kira enters. Later, Yoshihiro is flying around since he can just do that on his own now, and manages to find and recognize Kira despite his new appearance, also noticing Hayato recording him. A couple of days later, July 15th to be exact, Josuke and Okuyasu are heading to school, and they run into Mikitaka, who draws their attention to an old electrical pylon that seems to have someone living on it. They suspect a guy to be a stand user, and if you're paying attention, you know they're right, and they go to investigate. The guy has a self-sufficient survivalist set up on the pylon, saying that he bought it so that he could live there. Josuke is still suspicious though, which is justified as he sees Yoshihiro there as well. Josuke goes after him, walking under the pylon, which is another physical stand named Superfly, causing anyone inside to be turned into metal when trying to leave, unless another person enters to take their place, an effect that also extends to the user. Josuke and Okuyasu attack Superfly, but it has another ability that reflects their attack back at them. Mikitaka manages to get the user back under the pylon so that Josuke can escape. The stand user manages to trap Mikitaka though, telling Josuke and Okuyasu that he's wearing a mask so that they wouldn't be able to find him when he runs away. Josuke re-enters the pylon to confront the stand user and save Mikitaka. The user is rather agile though and manages to evade Josuke's attacks as well as angling the energy reflection to attack him back. Josuke somehow used Crazy Diamond's ability to send the user's attacks back at him and defeat him. The whole affair makes him decide to never leave the pylon again and tells them that there are two other stand users after Rohan and Koichi. Meanwhile, an architect arrives at Rohan's house to discuss the repairs to his house, and he uses Heaven's Door on him and sees that the guy for some reason doesn't want anyone looking at his back, which he is clearly serious about with how he enters Rohan's house. The guy awkwardly inspects the damage to Rohan's house and is still adamant to not let anyone see his back. Meanwhile, Josuke and Okuyasu are searching for Koichi and Josuke opts to go to Yuya to help track him down. Yuya agrees to help Josuke in exchange for Josuke fixing his injuries. Again. The two begin their search, and Yuya reveals that they're being followed by the enemy. When Josuke tries to confront him, he disappears and is replaced by Josuke's mother. This angers Josuke, though Yuya is unable to properly locate the enemy, who narrates that his stand name is Enigma, and through flashback we find out that his stand ability involves being able to turn someone into paper upon discovering what behaviors a person exhibits when they're afraid. Josuke pulls a piece of paper from his mother's pocket, and a gun emerges from it, firing at Josuke. Crazy Diamond manages to catch the bullet, though, and the stand user reveals himself and explains what he can do to Josuke, threatening the imprisoned Koichi. Josuke tries attacking him, but he evades, sending the Koichi paper in front of an oncoming car. This causes Josuke to reveal his fear tell, allowing Enigma's ability to activate. Josuke manages to put up a fight, though, delaying his own entrapment, deducing that the papers most likely wasn't Koichi, but the possibility that it was caused him to try to save it regardless. The stand user leaves in a cab he had stowed away, telling Yuya that the papers can be opened by anyone and that he was smart to try not to help Josuke, as the user had already figured out his fear tell. As he's going down the road, the user sees that Highway Star is pursuing him, having been inspired by Josuke's selflessness. The taxi stops, and Yuya attempts to figure out a way to safely rescue Josuke and Koichi. As he attempts to do this, he has to work his way through several traps set by Enigma's user, ultimately getting himself trapped so that he could reach inside a shredder to rescue Josuke and Koichi, who easily dispatch the stand user. Back at Rohan's, more hijinks are ensuing as Rohan begins to get curious about the architect's back. He manages to get a look at it when he gets stuck in a hole in the floor, causing the guy to freak out. Something resembling a door opens on the architect's back, and a stand appears on Rohan asking for a piggyback ride. Rohan realizes attached to him, and the stand Cheap Trick tells him to burn the pictures from his investigation. Rohan tries using Heaven's Door, but part of its ability binds it to Rohan as if it were his own stand. Rohan ends up calling Koichi over to help him, but when he arrives, Rohan tells him the situation, but Koichi, at what may be his peak stupidest, doesn't believe him, only thinking that he's joking, and leaves.
Remember the time you ate my goldfish, and you lied to me and said I never had any goldfish? But why'd I have the bowl part? Why did I have the bowl?
Rohan leaves his house attempting to get help while not showing anyone his back, and while I'm not completely certain how cheap tricks work, I feel like he'd accomplish that with a backpack or holding one of his big sketch pads behind him instead of doing, well, this. Cheap Trick reveals that it can talk to non-stand users, aggravating the guy he's doing that to, but Rohan managed to get around that with Heaven's Door. He runs into more problems though, as Cheap Trick can also communicate with animals and has several cats and dogs attack Rohan. Luckily though, Koichi decides to be useful again and runs the animals off. When he tries using 3 freeze on Cheap Trick, it tears at Rohan's back, causing Koichi to stop. Rohan, seeming to be crazy again, turns to show Koichi Cheap Trick, but it turns out he had a trick of his own, as he had been making his way to Raimi's alley, which when the stand turned to face Koichi gets dragged by the hands to presumably hell. Later that evening, Kira invades the apartment of 2 people he'd run into on the train earlier, murdering the man, giving his spiel to the woman before killing her as well. The murders had actually been recorded by Hayato, but Kira manages to see him as he runs away. A few days later, Kira confronts Hayato while he's in the bath, and, well, there are parts of this scene that manage to be sufficiently disturbing, partly due to it also kind of feeling like a Subway Jared type situation about to go down. Meanwhile, Yoshihiro is panicking because our heroes have decided to investigate the Kawajira household, agreeing to meet under the Pepsi sign the next morning at 8:30. Later that evening, we see that Kira had ended up killing Hayato, causing him to start freaking out, only made worse after Yoshihiro shows up and tells him about the hero's new lead. For whatever reason, the stand arrow stabs itself into Kira, causing some strange effect on his stand. The next morning, Hayato is apparently alive and well somehow, and Kira is seemingly in high spirits, even donning an arguably worse hairstyle. Yoshihiro flashes flashes us back to the previous night, showing different events, and Kira stating that the arrow had apparently given Killer Queen a new ability, because it didn't have enough of those already. Kira walks with and continues to intimidate Hayato while wearing the most conspicuous tie ever, because custom ordering ties to match your stand is the definition of blending in. Kira parts ways with Hayato and he runs into Rohan, who had already arrived under the sign, who immediately recognizes him. Rohan asks him about the picture he was in, but when he tries to run away, he simply uses Heaven's Door on him. When he does this, he sees what seems to be a warning for him to not keep reading, followed by a recap of events immediately following. Rohan continues to read even further, learning that Kira is Kosaku, but is immediately killed by Killer Queen's third bomb, Bites the Dust, which can explode anyone who finds about Kira's identity through Hayato. As Hayato sees Rohan die, we cut to him waking up in his bed again, and the previous events of the day replay themselves. Kira realizes what happened and explains to Hayato the situation that he is currently in. Hayato decides to try to prevent Rohan from dying, but is somehow affected by Heaven's Door despite not coming into contact with him. Kira then arrives, saying that despite time being reversed, fate causes certain events to still happen. How fate decides what does and doesn't get to change, I have no idea. However, something that can be chalked up to Bites the Dust ability is that Rohan still dies from Killer Queen's explosion. Hayato ends up running into our heroes, them having no idea what happened to Rohan. They realize who Hayato is, and he tries to leave before they can begin questioning him. Josuke tries to be friendly with him, introducing everyone. Hayato attempts to kill himself to prevent Bites the Dust from activating. However, the miniature Killer Queen is preventing him from doing it. The group sees this and are killed by Bites the Dust, to Hayato's horror. Hayato comes to the conclusion that he's going to have to kill Kira, deciding to use a now different-looking plat. The rest of the morning repeats similar to before, though with minor alterations due to Hayato attempting to change things. In the street, we see that Kira is again suspicious of Hayato, and the stretching of time we get here nears Namek explodes of 5 minutes level. During the 10 minutes that's supposed to be 10 seconds, Hayato manages to hit Kira with the Plat's air bullets. Unfortunately, due to the way the coffee had spilt that morning, he had his watch in his shirt pocket, which is apparently enough to protect him from one of those. Kira manages to deduce roughly the amount of times Bites the Dust went off due to Hayato having come up with the idea of using Plat, aka Stray Cat, to try to kill him. Kira begins to monologue about having basically won, and that he doesn't let that little flub slow down his victory ramble, though, even going so far as to double down on it. Hayato, though, emphasizes that he never told anyone, only having made a phone call to someone that morning who had overslept. Hayato, a very strange but relatively average 11-year-old, has just outwitted a superpowered serial killer. Kira tries to flee, but Josuke is too fast, and Kira is forced to remove Bites the Dust to fight him off. Rohan's survival confirming for Hayato that he is safe. Kira monologues some more, and even though everyone else is right down the street, Okuyasu and Hayato just kind of stand there and watch with Kira, proving to be no match for Josuke to fight. Okuyasu saves Josuke from an attack by Kira, but instead it hits him despite not having been touched by Kira. Kira then opens a compartment that's somehow on Killer Queen's stomach, revealing that he has Stray Cat in there, and that he's able to use its air bullets as nearly invisible remote bombs, because Kira needs more powers, of course. Somehow the others don't hear any of this, nor do Hayato or Josuke attempt to alert them. But anyway, Kira begins his bubble assault on Josuke, managing to land a good hit on him. Josuke gets to the wounded Okuyasu, but before he can fix him, Hayato deduces that he must have made Okuyasu into a bomb. Hayato nearly sacrifices himself to remove the explosive from Okuyasu, but Josuke manages to save him in time. Josuke attempts to wake up the healed Okuyasu, but it seems as though he was too late. Before another of the air bullets can hit him, Josuke uses a blade made out of his own blood to evade the explosion by pulling himself with shrapnel from his own wound. Josuke, despite Hayato's insistence, carries Okuyasu along with them as they attempt to get to safety in a nearby house. As they hide, one of the air bullets comes into a crack in the wall, and Kira is somehow able to tell where they are despite not being able to see them, even managing to hit Josuke again, this time causing much more severe injuries. Josuke, through some ingenuitive thinking, manages to hit Kira with a shard of glass, and Kira sends another larger bomb at them. But Josuke uses a lighter on Hayato's vest, causing Yoshihiro to flee from his pocket, who had been telling Kira Josuke's position via a cell phone. Josuke takes the phone from him and deceives Kira into destroying the photo Yoshihiro was in. After being informed of this, Kira is hit by the second shot of glass Josuke has fired. With him being severely injured as well, Josuke makes his way to Kira ready for his final assault. Kira attempts to defend with Killer Queen, but is outmatched in power. Unfortunately, Josuke's final blows were blocked by Stray Cat. Kira turns the air bubble into a bomb, sending it right at Josuke, who is far too injured to evade, but suddenly As it turns out, Okuyasu is alive, saying that he had a dream where he saw his brother who told him that he had to decide where he was going. With Okuyasu running to return to Morio, he woke up. Kira attempts to use Stray Cat again, but it is taken by Okuyasu, and Kira begins ranting. The others then show up, having been alerted by the explosion. Our heroes tell Kira that he's lost, something that he is unable to process, causing him to collapse. Just then, emergency vehicles arrive, and a nurse approaches him, allowing him a hostage, with Jotaro and Josuke being unable to get close enough to do anything. Hayato tells them that he must be planning to use Bites the Dust on her this time, his spiel getting way too personal, even him confessing his crimes to her. Jotaro runs to stop him before he can activate Bites the Dust, but...
有名な人って緊張すっからよ。そこにいやがったな漫画家。まだ殴り足らねえぞこら。
Well, he got over that quick. How do you follow up Stardust Crusaders? Many would think that you couldn't, but Araki tried anyway with Diamond is Unbreakable. And now, hey, does this seem familiar to anyone else? Hang on, let me check on something. That was weird, but anyway, Koichi keeps Kira from activating Bites the Dust long enough for Jotaro to use... In stopped time, Jotaro is able to lay down that famous beating on Kira that we all know and love. That sends Kira flying back, but he's still not down for good, leading us into the greatest battle in the entire part, maybe even the entire series. That's right, everyone. It's Yoshikage Kira versus... the Ambulance. With that, Kira is finally dead, the nurse telling his name to the two police officers on the scene. Hayato laments that Kira will seemingly go unpunished, but then we cut to see Kira in Reimi's alleyway, with her allowing him to realize... Rather painfully, it would seem. Reimi tells Kira who she is, and Kira figures out that he's in the Purgatory Alley, which I guess his ghost dad told him about. Kira attempts to turn her around, his face even reverting to his original, when Reimi's dog causes Kira to turn and be dragged away by the hands, allowing her to finally be at peace. Our heroes all gather to say their goodbyes to Reimi and see her as she and the dog pass on. Meanwhile, at the Kawajiri household, Hayato finally is able to mourn the loss of his father, attempting to hide that from his unassuming mother. Later, we see Jotaro and Joseph departing. Josuke waves them off, using Crazy Diamond to swipe some money from Joseph, who we find out adopted the invisible baby, as well as learning that Jotaro got his doctorate in marine biology. We get a few scenes seeing all the characters off, showing how they have and haven't changed over the arc, as an end to the part and a final goodbye to Morio. And that was Diamond is Unbreakable. Not only did it manage to live up to the previous part, but surpass it. The smaller, more character-focused story allowed for a lot more development of the characters and setting. You really get to know the town of Morio and its residents. at least the stand using ones. And you also get a real sense of how the characters develop and change over the course of the part. While Morio as a setting isn't as exotic or grand as the various locales from Stardust Crusaders, the smaller, more intimate setting helps it feel more real and relatable. The way it's portrayed in the anime is excellent. The choice of color scheme is resemblant of that of the Kolaski Supo cartoons, which, if you didn't know, is the studio that made Rugrats, Rocket Power, and the like. While I'm not sure if those were an inspiration of the look, it's difficult not to draw a parallel due to the part taking place in the 90s, and Morio's yellow sky and turquoise trees were a signature aspect of their style. This color scheme blends well with the Jojo style, given the series' relationship with color has been dynamic since it first came out, the anime having homaged that in previous parts by having used the color-changing action scenes. Josuke is another Jojo that people see as boring. I feel as though this is due to the fact that he is the first of the series protagonists to not have a singular aspect of his personality stick out as his thing. This isn't necessarily a negative, as he has more of a rounded personality than his predecessors, coming across more like an average teenager as opposed to the constant stoicism of Jotaro. And while he does have the thing with his hair, that comes across more like a running gag, like Jotaro saying yare yare or Joseph running away. Josuke also doesn't have anywhere near an easy at times solving his problems as Jotaro, often using some sort of clever use of his stand ability to deal with the enemy before dealing his flurry of blows. This makes for far more tense and interesting stand battles than many of those seen in Stardust Crusaders. Personally, I'm kind of sad that we never got to see him again after this part, seeing as both Joseph and Jotaro make further appearances after their arcs have finished. Speaking of Jotaro's return, it's nice to have, even with him having been nerfed between parts and not actually doing much of anything most of the time. With that said, he is clearly still the same character we saw in Stardust Crusaders, though now having matured and at times assuming sort of a mentor role for the Morio crew. Joseph also has a significantly reduced usefulness compared to his role in Stardust Crusaders, not really doing much other than hang around after the Invisible Baby episode. While I understand letting the new characters shine, it would have been nice to at least get a few more moments of him bonding with Josuke. As for the new characters, they're all pretty good for the most part, though at times they have a tendency to be a bit one-note. Koichi, through his character, introduces the idea of an evolving stand that acts as a physical representation of his growth throughout the arc. While he does become more noticeably outgoing and aggressive throughout the arc, he still is often too naive for my liking at times, coming off dumber than the self-proclaimed stupid character Okuyasu. Adding to that, the way his relationship with Yukiko ends up going is baffling and makes little sense. Okuyasu fills a role as the typical tough guy, though his backstory and the way it gets mostly resolved adds a fair amount of depth and tragedy to the character. I say his arc gets mostly resolved, because while he did confront his brother's killer and sort of managed to come into his own, him trying to fix his father never really gets resolved, nor is implied that it ever will. Rohan was introduced surprisingly late into the story for one of the main protagonists, which was an interesting choice, and it actually kind of works, allowing the other characters time to grow before adding another. Rohan's growth, though, is mostly between his first and second appearances, as he started out being crazy and ended being somewhat less crazy. Though his eccentricities have made him a fan favorite and writer favorite character, even having an entire spin-off series of his own, some of which has recently been adapted to 2 OVAs. Otoshi, the first antagonist, is set up as an intimidating character only being seen through his stand. The problem arises when he is actually revealed, he turns out to be extremely lame and only undercuts the threat, especially when he just decides to stop being evil forever once he's beaten. Kira, on the other hand, is an amazing antagonist, being a truly worthy follow-up to Dio while being a completely different type of character. While Dio was over the top in every way and reveling in all of his evil actions, Kira's intimidation comes from his subtlety, being able to murder so many people so casually and still simply live life like he's any other person, which is a frightening concept made worse by his kind of overpowered stand. That's probably the biggest flaw with Kira as a villain, is that his stand is just kind of ridiculous. Even before he obtained the god-tier Bites the Dust power, he had the ability to explode anything he touches or touches that into oblivion, as well as being able to release a near indestructible little car that also explodes people. To add to that, during the final fight, him using Stray Cat to have explosive projectiles that he can apparently control just kind of takes things a little too far, almost. The Bites the Dust ability actually kind of works for the story, and despite it not making sense functionally, makes for a great build-up to the climax. A lot of this feels like it may have come from Araki attempting to make him as powerful as the time-stopping vampire. None of this ends up hurting the plot too much, and Kira's screen presence makes the overpowered nature of his stand actually kind of work in a way. Hayato is the main focus of the climax, and the key to Kira's defeat is one of the best parts of the story. Him being a creeper who films his parents in their bedroom was kind of unnecessary, and there was probably a way to write his growing suspicions without having that. Another problem is it makes Kira's murder and replacement of his father be almost ultimately better for his life. as without that he was probably heading towards some jail time of his own in his future. With that said, the way his character does progress and how he's ultimately able to beat Kira despite not having known about stands or anything going on with the characters before he met them is one of the most gripping and well done sequences in the entire series. Now, I've said that this is my favorite part. I can't say that it's the best. While it used to be wildly considered to be, it has since been surpassed by the legendary Steel Ball Run. But what makes Diamond Unbreakable so great is that it's a more focused story and well-developed setting. What makes me like it so much is the combination of that quality, having the classic JoJo's feel, as well as basically everything I praised about it in this video. All in all, I'd say Part 4 can best be described as a beautiful duang that is not Crash. Next time, I hope you like Tonio's because we're getting Italian.